Today we're going to work on the project for fourth grade positive and negative space. And what we're going to make today is this project. It's actually a Japanese style of work. It's called a notan, I believe is the way that you say it. And it's a play on anytime there is negative space, there's a positive space somewhere else. So that's kind of the idea behind notan. So that's that. So for this project, what you're gonna need is, I took a 12 by 18 sheet of paper and I just cut it into a 12 by 12 square. Don't throw this away. This is a great piece of paper for them to use to glue on top of so they don't get glue on there. So I kind of use this as the scrap piece of paper to glue. So it's a great place just to save it, and you can give them the square and the extra piece. And then the other thing that you need is a 6 by 6 square. And this is a great place to use those Astro Brite papers because they look really good in contrast with the black paper. So regular construction paper works fine too, but the Astro Brites are really fun. So I'm gonna use this orange piece of Astro Brite for mine. So this one's really fun. The kids have fun with it, and yeah, and you can kind of make it more simple or more complicated, and I'll show you that as we go along. So the first thing I like to do is I like to center the colored square, and very lightly, the kids have trouble with that, but very lightly trace around it with a pencil. And this just kind of will help them place their pieces as they cut them. So just very lightly, there we go. You probably can't see it on the camera, but there's the pencil square. So basically what they're gonna do is they're gonna cut about 2 shapes out of each side, and just free-form shapes. So like just very organic, whatever shape, kind of whatever way their scissors take them. So they can draw their shapes, but as I'm sure you guys know doing art, they tend to overthink it when they draw. So I would try to get them to just cut. So there are a few tips that you can give them so that they're successful. So they're gonna wanna think they're gonna wanna cut 1 or 2 shapes out of each side. I try to stay away from cutting the corners. You can cut the corners, but it's a little bit more complicated when you put the pieces back. But it is doable, it's not a big deal. And the other thing that they need to remember is anytime they cut, they're cutting in one single cut. So they don't wanna cut like lots of pieces. And I'll show you what I mean. So if you're cutting out your one, you can cut any direction, any shape, you can cut curves, angles, whatever you want. But the idea is it's in one single cut. So whatever shape they want. So basically what I'm gonna do is every time I cut a shape, I pretend like it's there and I flip it out and I keep it there on the piece of paper. And this will help them to keep their shapes organized. It's easy to lose pieces in this project. Basically nothing is gonna get thrown away. They're gonna use every piece. So pick up the paper, cut their shape, and then lay the shape they cut out back down. And that way they won't lose their pieces, which can happen. So I'm just gonna keep cutting. Like I said, any type of shape they want. So every time they cut a shape, I would recommend they lay the square back down, which is why we did the outline, and then put this back down. And sometimes it can be tricky for them to see which way it could go, because really it fits on the edge the wrong way, but that's not the mirror image. So they wanna think mirror image. So they're gonna go around their paper and they're gonna do 1 to 2 shapes. They might run out of room to do 2 shapes on every side, but 1 to 2 shapes on each side. So I'm just gonna keep going with that, and then I'll show you the next step. Okay, so now I've cut a couple shapes out of each side, and that's what we have right now. You can stop right here. It's totally fine. You show where you've cut the negative space out of here and turned it over and made it into positive space over here. So you can already see that. And you may have kids that this is harder than others, and if this is as far as they get, that's totally fine. And if that's as far as they get, they would glue down the center and then 1 at a time glue the pieces they cut out. But it looks really cool if you take it 1 step further. So if you're gonna take it 1 step further, I just 1 by 1 So encourage them not to pick up all the pieces at once, because then it's like a puzzle that you have to put back together. So just pick up one shape, and then out of this shape, you're gonna cut another shape, and you can follow the edges of it, or you can, and as you notice as you're cutting, the paper does tend to fold a little bit. They just want to be careful not to have it rip. But even if, see how it kind of ends up a little folded, that's okay, because it's just going to get glued back down. So basically, after they're done with that, you're just going to set it back where it came from, and that line helps them see where to line it up. And then this piece that I cut out of it, I'm going to put back the other direction. And this is where it starts to look really cool. So they're just going to keep going, cutting whatever shapes they want. They can do them as complicated as they want or as simple, whatever. And that's what's kind of fun about this project, is you don't really have to plan it out. It just kind of however it happens, which can be kind of fun. So I'm going to put that one back. They don't always lay really great before you glue them. And then this one goes right here. So I'm just going to keep going along, and then I'll show you the next step. So now I've got all my pieces cut out. I've cut out the centers of these, and as you can see, whatever shapes they want. You can get them simple, a little bit more complicated, whatever they want to do. Yet the key again, and you might want to keep reminding them, is every time they cut, it's got to be a single cut, so not several pieces, because sometimes as they cut more complicated things, they like to cut out little tiny pieces as they go, but they need to keep it as a single piece. So everything needs to be done in one cut. And then they're gonna lay it out. If they've cut really far into the paper, that's fine. You might find these pieces hang off a little, and that's fine. They can shift the whole thing whichever direction. That's why nothing is glued down yet. So once everything's laid out and they see how it's gonna look, they're just gonna take one thing at a time. So they're gonna pick up that center piece, and this is where that extra piece of paper that you cut off of the 12 by 12 square comes in handy. So there's two different ways. You can use a glue stick. I've done both. The glue stick is great. The thing that can sometimes happen with the glue stick when you're working with these kind of more delicate pieces, because they're so thin from being cut, is they can rip. So I'll show you kind of both ways. So they can use the glue stick. You just have to be really careful. Sometimes you kind of have to like dot it rather than rub the glue stick. So they're gonna have to be pretty careful with the glue stick, but it does work just fine. It holds it down fine. It works great. So then I'm just going to lay this down, and they have that pencil line that you traced in the very beginning to kind of help line up those edges nice and straight. So I kind of just go around, line up the edges, and try to get them pretty nice. Oh, I accidentally glued a piece down. Okay. So this center piece is all glued down now, and just rub it down gently. Okay. So some of their other pieces might have gotten disturbed a little, that's okay. So then I like to start on these outside pieces. So if the glue stick, if you're feeling like they're gonna rip their pieces, they can. Instead, one thing I really like to use is, I just call them glue cups. It's just Elmer's glue in a cup with a lid, and they actually last for a long time. I put this glue in here probably 2 or 3 months ago, and it's not dried out. It's still liquid. It still works great. And you just use a brush. The best brushes actually to use are those cheap dollar store brushes that aren't really good for much else. And then they just dip the glue in, wipe a little bit off, and then put the glue on. So these are a great trick. They work really well for a lot of projects. I really like the glue cups. And when the glue does finally dry out, it takes a long time, it just pulls right out of the cup. So it's super easy to clean up. So anyway, so just brush off the glue and then put each piece on. If you do use the glue cups and the brushes, you just have to remember at the end, the brushes, oh, okay, I just made a mistake, and this is good because I'm gonna show you guys. I put the glue on the wrong side. I should have put the glue on this side. The kids are gonna do this. I've done it several times. That's fine. If they put it on the wrong side, just set it aside and let that glue dry. It dries clear, it's not a big deal. Like I said, I just did it. So, and then have them let that piece dry and then just keep going. So I'll just keep going. I of course did that on my first piece, but it does get a little tricky, and that's why I recommend they leave them laid out like this and just work one. Don't try to work with more than one piece at a time. Just work with one piece. So this one I did correctly. And they have that pencil line to help them reline up those edges. Just line them up and then press it down. And then I like to do all the outside pieces. These pieces, they first come out and then come back in and glue the center pieces in. And I'm gonna keep double checking that I'm gluing the right side and they'll catch on. They'll all mess it up once or twice and then they'll start to double check that they are gluing the right side, because it's really easy to do. And they can just scoot those center pieces out of the way a little bit. And you can just let them know, the more careful they are placing these pieces, the cooler it's gonna look. So if they spend a little extra time placing them really carefully, it ends up looking a lot cooler. It looks like this piece is actually a little off. So I'm just gonna keep gluing all the outside pieces. Okay, so I've glued all the outside pieces. I even re-glued that one that I glued backwards. So now I'm just gonna glue the inside pieces, and I'm gonna do it exactly the same way. Like I said, you can use the glue stick or you can use the glue cup, whichever one you want. So I'm just gonna double check that I'm doing it the right way. And I'm just gonna glue these one at a time. This is also nice when you have that little, that nice little line that they've drawn. It helps you line up these pieces so they're nice and straight. So they're just gonna glue all of those inside pieces now. So I've got all the pieces glued on now, and so it's mostly done. The last step that they may need to do, and this is where the glue brushes or the glue cups are really nice, is there might be a few little pieces that didn't get glued down really well. So the glue brushes are really easy to come, just add some little bits of glue. So just find any little spots. Make sure everything's glued down, a little spot right there. So that is the finished product of the 4th grade project for positive and negative space. Again, it's called a Japanese notan. I believe that's how you say it. And I always like to end the project letting the kids show them to the class. They love to show them to the class, and always encourage them when they're showing them to the class to use the proper vocabulary so they can talk about how the negative space that they cut out here, they turn into positive space here. This one's kind of fun. It's kind of an optical illusion, so they can kind of see it in different ways. So they can talk about that. And then it's always nice, especially as they're older in 4th grade, to also, when they share it with the class, to talk about ways that they were successful and ways that maybe they could have improved. So, you know, you could guide them into these things. You know, I glued this one the wrong way, or maybe I could have cut this one differently. And that is the finished product.